Welcome to the latest edition of the Gut Health Insights series of short presentations. Last time we talked about allostatic load and the different types of chronic stress and how they are harmful for overall health, well-being, and longevity. This time I'll repeat a little bit of this and talk about the good and the bad sides of stress. I will also talk about the long-term consequences of early life stress, how that programs the stress system from the times you're born to the end of your life. And in the following sessions, I will be talking about addressing the question, are women more sensitive to stress? And about the healing brain. So how can we harness the inner healing mechanisms to combat stress? So a little overview of our different views of wellness and disease. So in our Western conceptualization, what we call healthcare is really a disease care model, which views the human body as a mechanical device with replaceable parts, which can be fixed with medications or surgical interventions. Wellness teachings over the centuries have viewed the mind, brain, body as an integrated energy system. Disease is the disturbance of balance. Therapy is the restoration of balance and strengthening of resilience. And finally, modern science is beginning to view the mind, brain, body continuum as an integrated supercomputer, which can only be understood in a systems biological view and treated in a holistic way. So we've come a long way in the way we've modeled in the Western world our well-being and our health. And I think we're getting closer to a model that is actually closer to reality and more effective in its interventions. Let me say a few words about good stress. So good stress is probably the most important things that, or a good stress response, the most important things that has evolved in evolution, that has saved our species from extinction many times before. A good stress response is essentially the brain preparing the body for optimal function in the face of an imminent threat. And this has happened to our ancestors and our pre-human cousins, primate cousins, for hundreds of thousands of years. So, for example, the stress response, which is an innate response to just viewing a snake or an attacking lion, will engage the system in an optimal way that maximizes the chances of either running away or fighting that attack. And there's many dimensions to that stress system that have been studied in great detail. It affects the way we think, our heart, our metabolism, our skin, our emotions, breathing patterns, digestion, immune system, and pain sensitivity. The amazing thing is that all these functions are coordinated when we are in a fight and flight situation. They're all adapted to each other, so there's enough blood flow to the brain and to the muscles. Our immune system is regulated in a way that protects us against infections. In any way, as I said, we wouldn't be alive as a species if we didn't have that system. Now, what has happened in the last 100 years or so, that stress system has been pushed to its limits and is actually changed into something else that has developed in a maladaptive way for our bodies and our health. So if you look at this, and I showed this in my last presentation, a very small number of people are actually in a state of optimal health. About half are in a suboptimal health state and a pre-disease state. like metabolic syndrome would fall into this category. And then close to 50% fall into this chronic disease state, and where our medical health care, or better said, disease care system has to take care of us. Almost 20% of our gross domestic product goes towards that expense of disease care, and it's close to $10,000 per patient per year. So a very expensive system. And the reason that we have this is because of this increasing allostatic load. This means a challenge of the stress systems that's so well developed to the point in a chronic fashion. It's not stimulated in a way that it was designed for, so for intermittent, usually rare threats, but it's stimulated in a continuous fashion. So it comes at an increasing cost for our health to have this stress system engaged and running all the time. So we can almost say bad stress creates the hidden burden of allostatic load, and that's underlying, as I explained last time, is underlying our chronic disease epidemic. Now, to get to a point of optimal health, to expand that category of individuals that are in optimal health, it would require health optimization, dealing with these chronic stresses, eliminating the allostatic load, returning to a situation where we just engage our acute stress system rarely. The whole curve would change, so the percentages would shift, increasing number of people in optimal health and a greatly reduced number of people in suboptimal health and a pre-disease state. So let's go back to how this system develops, this stress system that's so well adapted. And obviously it starts at birth. It's determined by our sex, by our race, by our genes. And the gene expression that comes out of the interaction of these various factors ultimately then leads to the formation of circuits in the brain, which ultimately determines our wellness and chronic disease and stress response system. So the influences that are really crucial early on in life, obviously we can't change our genes, can't change our sex, and we can't change our race, are the interaction with the primary caregiver in a positive way, and the interaction with the world in a way that is not compromising or programming the system in a way that genes are expressed that later make us more vulnerable to chronic disease and lack of wellness. So the factors that are important to lead to a positive development is generally have been identified as a high socioeconomic status, stable early environment, and the development of resilience of the brain to perturbations. These things are encoded via epigenetic mechanisms into our gene expression patterns and affect the shaping and evolving of our brain stress circuits and other networks in the first 18 to 20 years of life. As an individual growing up, again, the high socioeconomic status or higher socioeconomic status, an effective social support system, a healthy diet. We talked about the stress that's generated by an unhealthy diet, like the standard American diet, regular exercise, and healthy mind states. This doesn't work at this stage through epigenetic mechanisms, but in modulatory ways that shapes the activity of various brain circuits. Here are the brain circuits in a simplified way. There's many others. So the salience, the system that assesses the salience of events around us and inside our body, systems of resilience, the stress response system, and systems that underlie motivation and drive. So on the other hand, the bad things that can happen along the way is early adverse life events. And there's many of those events, from the death of a parent, illness of a serious illness of the mother, negative metabolic state of the mother, stress of the mother, and a marital discord later, a bit later in development. All of this, there's a number of studies that have shown how they can negatively impact the development of this of these brain systems. And then in the growing up adult, so the allostatic load comes in here. So this chronic engagement of the stress system to the point that the homeostasis is defended at the cost of the health of the organism. And similarly here, so the negative factors, low socioeconomic status, and an unhealthy diet. So we have competing factors that are either important for the positive development of these systems or that compromise the healthy development. The problem is, what is programmed early in life is something that stays with us. As humans, we have many ways of trying to compensate for that and train our brain to develop mechanisms like patches, software patches that can overcome the underlying problems of development. But in general, they stay with us. And certainly in terms of the unhealthy diet, this is something that, as I expressed in many of my presentations, that we can alter, that we have the possibility to alter from early on in life, and which we know now today from areas like nutritional psychiatry that have a major impact on the healthy development of these systems. So ultimately, if these negative influences dominate and nothing is being done to counteract them, then we will end in this chronic disease category, about 45% of the population. And if we're somewhere in the middle, that these negative and positive influences are balanced, we may end up in this pre-disease category.